Hi, everyone. Give me 1 second and I will get my screen shared and we'll be set to go. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Helen Sheriff, and thank you so much for joining me today for finding, building, and leveraging bookish communities for career success. I thought I'd start just by introducing myself and giving you a little bit of my background, so you know who I am and where I'm coming from, and then we'd go from there. So I have been working toward being a professional writer for over 20 years. I wrote my very first novel when I was 23 years old, and it was bad, and it sits on a computer. But that's where the whole idea and the dream of becoming a writer was born. And so for the last 2 decades, I have been navigating many a bookish community and doing so kind of willy-nilly, at will, organically, which I think is a natural and normal way to approach community. But as I transitioned from becoming an unpublished author to being a published author last fall, I kind of wished I had been a little bit more proactive in my bookish community navigation. And so I put together this class just as something for you to think about, no matter where you are in this journey, how you might approach the communities you're already in differently, but also and perhaps find some other communities that you're not part of that might really be an asset to your career, because that's what I'm looking forward to, is having a career as a writer and seeing these communities as networking opportunities. And so I wrote for like 20 years, and then 2 years ago, I finally signed a contract for my very first book. It was the 4th book I've written, but the first one to be published. It's called Boop and Eve's Road Trip. It's in my pretty son behind me. And at that point, I kind of looked at my life and thought, I've worked in a classroom as a teacher for the last 2 decades, and that didn't really prepare me for marketing. I don't know anything about marketing, and I was going to need to learn. And so I quickly looked for ways to learn how to do that, and looked for communities that already existed, that I was already part of, that might be able to support that. And basically what I did was I took like a topic every month and went and learned about it. I'm not saying I became an expert in a month on anything, but I learned enough about it to be able to make some competent decisions and to move forward. So a month on building a website, a month on search engine optimization, a month on writing newsletters, a month on writing copy, a month on graphic design. And it sort of gave me an across the board approach to being able to look at my platform. And that's sort of where I am now. The book came out, I've been marketing, and now I'm sort of reflecting on that whole process, on the writing process from the get-go to now, and looking at how communities benefited that. Especially, I think having a book launch during a pandemic made the community part of it maybe more clear than it would have been otherwise. Not to say that they weren't always there and always supportive, but I think it gave an importance to that community. And I expect that going forward, I will continue to hold the communities that I'm part of as an essential part of my success and happiness in this journey. And so hopefully some of the things, I'll give you some ideas that will help launch some ideas for you, and we'll go from there. So my first slide here, writing communities. So wherever you are in your career, if you're here, you're writing something, and writing communities are going to offer 3 potential things here. We've got craft, emotional support, and marketing. So starting with craft, you've got classes, and they're both in-person and online classes, and you can Google those. I would recommend finding classes that are as specific as you write. if you have no idea what you want to write about, then, go ahead, take a general learn how to write kind of class. But once you start to get an idea of, I want to write a romance novel, or I want to write a fantasy, finding classes that are specific to that genre can be really, really important. I had the experience of wanting to write children's books for a really long time. And that's what most of the classes that I took were in. And then Boopany's Road Trip transformed in the writing process from a young adult book to women's fiction. And I just kept going with it. And it didn't really occur to me that I had never taken any classes on writing women's fiction, because I thought writing's writing and, it's all good. Well, come to find out, there were some things I was doing that, while are great in the YA market, are not as acceptable in the women's fiction market. And I didn't know that, because I read women's fiction, but I wasn't in that community. And so I would recommend that when you're taking craft classes, to look for things that are specific as you are able to define your craft. And another thing when it comes to classes, the conversation is always, or often you hear the conversation between, should I get an MFA? And I can't answer that question for you, of course, but I have an MFA in writing for children. And it's not to say that many of the things I learned about writing for children don't apply to adults, just to clear that up a little bit. But I think the thing to think about with an MFA is they are very expensive. And in all likelihood, you will not get a return on investment on that degree. If you are okay with that, if the idea of going, for me, the idea of going to classes made me accountable, it put me in a community of people who are all trying to do the same thing. It was a very lovely experience. I grew as a writer very quickly. I had access to top-notch critique partners and professors. And, I was a much better writer for having done it. Will I ever get that money back? Well, I'd like to think so, but the odds are not in my favor. And so, just know that there are also tons and tons and tons of classes that are not part of MFA programs that are wonderful. And many of them are online, giving access to people all over the international community to take those classes. And so, I wouldn't shortchange that as an idea. Another option for a writing community is forming some sort of a critique group. They are generally 4 to say 8 people. I guess I've heard of as big as 10. And they exchange pieces of their manuscript along the way and give each other feedback. They can be a little more tricky to find. Generally, sometimes bookstores can help you find them. But other than that, I think you really need to be part of a bigger organization. And so I do want to talk about that in terms of all of these things. The writing community is finding at least 2 organizations to get a membership within. I would recommend getting one that's in person and local to you, where you can have in real life writing buddies. That can be really valuable along the way. And it doesn't necessarily matter if they write the same thing or not. And then having another bigger, broader, geographical base writing organization that's specific to your genre, probably. So in my case, for example, I live in the Richmond area. I belong to James River Writers and do some in-person things with them, although lately they've been online, but hopefully we're getting back to normal soon. And then I also belong to the Women's Fiction Writers Association, which I've never done anything in person with, though I have participated in tons of online classes and things like that. I'm currently the volunteer who matches their critique groups, so I have some, inside knowledge as to how that kind of thing works. But I think that it's important to have both geographical foundation, broad foundation, and then also more of a local niche group. And those sorts of organizations often have conferences and classes and things like that. So they can be a really good way to find out about things. Attending conferences is a great opportunity. And So back to the idea of a critique group, you have this handful of people, you exchange little bits and pieces of it on probably a monthly, maybe a biweekly process, and give each other feedback. And that can help you really grow your craft quite quickly and help you get to a finished draft more quickly, with the accountability factor being there as well. And then the other one is a beta reader. So for people who maybe don't want to be interrupted on a monthly basis with meeting with a group of people, you can wait till you're done with a draft and exchange it with another person who is also done with the draft, or will be at some point in the future. You know, I've called some writer friends and been like, hey, will you take a look at this draft? If next time you need a draft read, I'll be happy to do that for you. And so that's called a beta reader. And it's nice when there are other, you can get readers to do it. And I think there's value in that, but it is nice if you can get a writer to do it, because I think they see things in terms of craft that a reader won't pick up on. Like a reader might tell you, hey, this scene's not, this got boring here, but they might not be able to pinpoint exactly why. And a writer might be able to help you find solutions more quickly. So those are ways in which the writing community can help develop your craft. Second thing the writing community can do is be emotional support. This is a hard industry. It is full of, I mean, from critiquing, which is hopefully gentle and constructive, but not always, to sending out query letters to agents and publishers and getting rejection letters. And then when you do have a book finally out there, getting bad reviews or not selling books at the rate you want to, it can be really, really hard. And people who aren't writers, while might be kind and well-meaning, they don't get it. And so having writer friends that you can count on and share your angst and concerns with can really help to make you feel not alone. Writing can be a very lonely endeavor, and having writer friends can help make it not so much. And then the final way that a writing community can help support you is through marketing efforts. That's probably what I'm going to spend the next bit talking about. And also, let me go back to emotional support real quickly and just say, like, they can also be emotionally supportive and like happy ways, like celebrating with you and you had victories. And that can be really joyful too. And when you have events, coming and being there for you and that sort of thing. So I think I only focused on the sad part of writing, but there's good parts too. Okay, so marketing collaboration with authors. I have quite a few ideas here of ways that I have or plan to collaborate with other authors. And I think this is really important. And I hope that some of these ideas will ring as maybe valuable for you. So from the top, giveaways. The first thing I would do is try to do giveaways with authors who have the same target reader that you do. A giveaway where you're giving away 2 books that are not very much alike is probably not going to work, because while you might have a broader audience, you might end up giving away your book to somebody who doesn't like your book at all. It doesn't like your kind of book, in which case you sort of failed. The big thing with book giveaways, though, would be to try to capture email addresses. That's the most valuable thing you can get from a giveaway. And I'll just promote a group for fun, but there's a thing called Book Sweeps as an example. And what they do is they have a giant mailing list that's genre specific, and they have giveaways. So as an author, I paid $50 and I joined a women's fiction giveaway. It was giving away, I think it was 40, maybe 50 books. It was a lot of books. One person got all of them, and then 49 other people got one of them. So I ended up giving away 2 copies of a book. And so a lot of people won, but one person got like a library. And in order for people to participate in this giveaway, they had to submit their email addresses to be entered in to win these books. And so at the conclusion of this giveaway, I got over 400 email addresses. Now, depending on your genre, I've heard that there are, sometimes people are getting like 900. So, that's just a neat way to get, and what do you do with these email addresses? It's an important question. Probably you have a newsletter. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but like giving away books, yeah, you can give away a book and you can get a review and that's cool. But giving away a book for an email address is better. And you want to do that. If you do that with the more authors you have, the more likely you are to get a lot of people trying to. The other thing with giveaways, I mean, I'm talking about giving away a book, but some people give away big stuff. I would advise against giving away something that's really expensive and nice, because you're going to have a lot of people signing up to win your prize that might not really care about your book. And that doesn't really do you any good in the long run. So keeping the prize to something super related to your book is key. The other thing is, if you do giveaways, they're even a better idea for people who have more than one book, and even better if they're in a series. And so I'll throw that out there. Group ads. There's lots of places to do ads. You can do them on Facebook and BookBub and Amazon and Google and whatever. And sometimes it might make sense to do an ad with someone else. You are splitting the cost. Again, I would want to have the same target audience. And I would want to have a hook that's maybe related to something going on in the world. And I would caution against having too many, opposite of giveaways, too many people involved, because you're splitting that audience, right? So like if I see an ad with 5 books on it, am I going to buy all 5 books? Maybe. But 2 people doing an ad together could make a lot of sense. The next idea I wanted to share with you is the idea of creating catalogs. And so you can use something like Canva, but it's not limited to that, to create a PDF that highlights a lot of authors and their books. And so I've done 2 of these so far. One I did was for book clubs. And so it was with 12 other authors, and it had like a picture of our cover, a short bio, and this back of the book summary, and then maybe like a little endorsement or an award it won or something like that at the top. And we sent them to book clubs. So when I went to a book club and presented there afterward, I'd send a note and say thanks, and I had said, and attached is a document with other authors who are willing to meet with your book club virtually if you guys are interested. And each of us was doing that and hopefully getting some cross-pollination of book clubs. So that's one way to do that. I did one more recently that was just a summer reading guide. And it had, I think, 24 books in it that were categorized by different things you might do in the summer, going to the beach, going to Europe, that kind of thing. And I shared it with my platform and got email addresses from it. But then many of the other 20 some authors also shared it with their platforms. And so that got my book in front of some readers that might not normally have made it in front of. So that's the idea of a catalog. I have not done an anthology, but I felt remiss if I didn't mention it. And in particular, doing an anthology that's in the world of your book. So maybe it's a short story set in the place of your book, and then other people who also have the same target audience, ideally, have books set in their worlds. And you can give it away for free for email addresses. You could potentially sell it. But, if I have a story set with Boop and Eve in it, but it's not in the book, at the end of it, I say, hey, if you like these characters, you should check out this book. Or maybe I highlight a secondary character or something like that. I've also seen them where it's just the first chapter of a whole bunch of books, kind of a teaser, hopefully gets you hooked and make you want to go buy some of these other books. Those were usually given for free since they're kind of, they're teasers, they're not the whole thing. But those are ways you could use anthologies to, and do that together with other authors. Um, Masterminds. So the idea of a mastermind is getting people together to share ideas with one another and to learn from one another. Um, I decided that I wanted to create an author mastermind back in, I don't know, early 2020. So before the pandemic hit. And I've been thinking about it in the fall. And so what I wanted to do is collect a group of local authors that would meet once a month, and we were going to help each other learn about marketing and share ideas and that kind of stuff. Well, I I started off with one person I had in mind because I had seen her speak on a panel at the James River Writers Conference. And she talked about marketing, and she talked about marketing like somebody who knew about marketing, rather than the loosey-goosey, like, I find my readers somewhere, they find me somehow. And that's Julie Valerie, who might be listening right now. So if you are, hi, Julie. But I approached her. I didn't know her from Adam, minus having heard her speak on a panel. And I said, hey, I liked hearing you speak on the panel. I went and bought her book and I read that, and I enjoyed it. And I said, I'm thinking about doing this. I have no idea whether anyone else would want to do this, if you would want to do this, but I think it's a good idea. And she said, yeah, I'm game. And so we collected several other friends, Melissa Face and Libby McNamee, and a couple other friends too, who all got together, and we met a few times, except our first meeting was supposed to be at my house, but then COVID hit. And so we did it on Zoom. And for the first few months, it was an author mastermind, and it was helpful. And I was learning a lot about marketing from my writer friends. It turned into something else, and I will talk about that journey in a little while, but I might come back to that mastermind idea in the future, because I think there's something really to that. Another way that you can collaborate with other authors is through panels. And I've done this with a couple of different people. So I belong to a few little market collaboration groups. One of them is Rising Tide Writers, and we all debuted women's fiction novels in 2020 and met online. And that's one group. Another group are all people who use the same publisher I did, which is She Writes Press, and we all launched in the fall of 2020. And with that second group, we decided we were going to do panels together, and then we could all pitch them to different places. And so we came up with various themes, and people signed up, like, if your book fits into this theme. And so I did 3 this way. I did one on armchair traveling, I did another one on Southern fiction, and another one on character development. And we've, done them all at least one place, and some we're going to do several different places. And so that's an interesting, neat way to collaborate with some people. Plus, when you're doing the panel, they're all sharing on their social media that this panel is happening, and you're sharing on yours. And so some of your readers might find them, and some of their readers might find you, as well as the larger organization that's hosting your panel. And let's see, another way to do it is through events. I'm going to be completely frank here. My launch was in a time of no events except for online ones. So I haven't had the experience of planning any real life events with other authors, but I very much look forward to that. And then the last thing I have on here is social media. And one of the groups I belong to, I think I mentioned Rising Tide Writers a minute ago, and it's a niche group that's part of a larger group, which is called 2020 Debuts, which was many, many people who debuted their novels in 2020. And what we would do is we would go into a Facebook group and we would say things like, hey, I just tweeted something. Do you guys mind going in and retweeting it? Or, hey, someone just wrote me a really bad review on Goodreads and it's sitting at the top. Do you mind going into Goodreads and liking some of my 5-star reviews so it puts that on top instead of this terrible one? And that kind of thing. So sort of harnessing the power of social media by supporting each other and giving boosts to things and posts. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but when you post things on social media, you have about 20 minutes for the algorithm of these things to really kick in. And you really do kind of want some traction right away. Yes, they'll give you second chances, and it's not like a post can't pick up a little bit later, but it's much easier to get a post going if you get some responses right away. And so having people who like that's your relationship with them. You guys, you check their accounts and you boost their things and like their things and comment on their things. And they do the same for you, can help get some traction going, so that people who you haven't planted in the audience might also see your stuff. So that's a lot of different ways to collaborate with other authors, and hopefully some of those were helpful. So for my next slide, I wanted to talk about reading communities. So reading communities already exist. You can create them, but they do already exist. And so leveraging communities that are already out there and participating in them as a reader first can be really important. This is something you could be doing before you're published, making other reader friends, and seeing how these kinds of groups run, and seeing, and then, you know, should a book ever come out, you've already got some seeds sown and some friendships in places. So starting at the top, libraries. Obviously, libraries are reading communities, and they host events that sometimes have authors there. They also, you know, have book clubs, and they recommend books to people all the time. So having librarians who enjoy your book and know your book can be really helpful. There are a lot of books out there, and getting libraries to discover your book can be a real feat. Wanted to point out that there is a website called WorldCat. If you don't already know about that, that's worldcat.com. And I think it's .com, maybe it's .org, whatever, you can find it. Anyway, you can type in the name of your book and it'll tell you many of the libraries where your book is housed. So that can be really neat. It's not comprehensive. I've definitely know that my book is in some places that are not listed there, but it's also really cool to go in there and see that my book is in Australia and New Zealand, and that's kind of neat. So what I did was I went through and looked at that list, and then I looked at places. I thought to myself, well, where are some places that aren't listed here, but I think like would have a reason to carry my book? Maybe because I used to live there and I do actually have some friends in the area, or maybe you know, in Bookish airship, they stopped in Savannah, Georgia, for example, and the Savannah libraries are not carrying my book right now. So what I did recently, we'll see how it turns out, but I bought some postcards, and I have a picture of the cover on the postcard, and I also have a QVC code, isn't that what anyway, QRC, anyway, whatever, those little black and white code things, and it takes you to my website where there's all kinds of information about my book. And then on the other side, you know, it says, hey, this is who I am. I'm happy to come in and do, you know, events if you're nearby, or virtually if you're not. And here's the ISBN number. And, you know, you might want to order this. So I've also done some things where I've emailed various libraries as well and sent my press release. So just ways to actually reach out to individual libraries to try to get them to carry your book. That can be awesome. You can do many of the same things at bookstores, although you can also drop off an advanced reader copy or even a free copy. Especially an independent bookstore, it's gonna be hard for them to sell your book if they haven't read it and love it. So giving them a copy of it to help motivate them to do that can be really helpful. If you do stop by and see your book in a bookstore, offering to give signed copies for them can be nice. You can leave bookmarks. And a lot of times bookstores also host events with authors. So that might be a good opportunity to meet their readers. Goodreads is another reading community. A lot of authors are really afraid of Goodreads, and that's because the reviews sit there, and Goodreads can have some more scathing reviews than some of the other places tend to. However, there are benefits. There are, you know, millions of readers who are doing Goodreads because they like to read. And so to stay away from it entirely is perhaps not in your best interest. You can do quite a few things with Goodreads to help promote your book. They do have giveaways. Those do cost some money, but it means that they're sending emails out when your book releases to everyone who's applied for the giveaway. People also generate lists of books, and getting your name added to one of those lists can be helpful. There are also communities like little book clubs within Goodreads, and they have specific genres. There's an American historical fiction one, for example, that sometimes has authors come and give talks and things like that. So looking around Goodreads for ways to connect with authors, with other readers, can be really helpful. Let's see. Also, even, again, you've got those reviews. You kind of want to have likes on your good reviews. It'll make them stack, so the good ones are higher. And so getting people that you know to go in and like those can be helpful. It also makes them show up in people's Goodreads news feeds. And so get some visibility for your cover. Social media. There are lots of readers in social media. It's tempting sometimes to think you have to be everywhere, or just to throw up your hands and say, I'm going to be nowhere because it's so overwhelming. I would suggest that you find one social media outlet, at least at first, to really dig into and, kind of ignore the other ones. Maybe have an account that directs people to the one that you're really going to be on. And which social media that is depends really on two things. One is your own interests. Like if you don't like one of the platforms, that's probably really not a good place for you to commit to spending a lot of time. But then also thinking about your target audience, and some of them are stronger in different platforms. So for example, if you are writing for young people, TikTok, book talk as they call it, might be a really great fit for you. If you write for people who are 70 years old, TikTok probably isn't the platform to hang out on. So just kind of figuring out who your readers are and where they are, and then where that overlaps with your own interests would be the best way to do that. But book communities are strong in Facebook. They're strong in Instagram. They're strong in TikTok and on YouTube. I think that the Twitter community and Pinterest are less strong for reader communities. That's not entirely true. There are exceptions. If you happen to write nonfiction stuff about crafts, then Pinterest might be a really great fit. But as a general comment, I'll just leave it there. And the other reading community, which is probably like my favorite to interact with, are book clubs. And now that people are so comfortable doing things online, it's not that crazy to think that you might stream into a book club. Even once they start meeting in person, having an author come as a Zoom guest could work really well. It can be difficult to hook up with book clubs. Almost all the authors that I've talked to who have done this are pretty much like using their friends and family and their book clubs. But over time, those people can then refer you to other book clubs. And I also do have writer friends who suggest me to some of their book clubs and things like that. So anyway, they're smaller groups, but they're actually reading your book and they're talking to you about it. And it can be just like this really amazing interaction. And, often if it's in person, you get like wine and food too, which can't go wrong with that. Okay. So next slide. One thing that I didn't, oopsie, all right. One thing that I didn't understand as a pre-published writer, and really more of a reader than a writer at that point, or at least more of a reader than an author, was how much power readers have to support authors. There are 4 things that I can think of that readers can really do that can help authors: writing reviews, promoting their books on their own social media platforms, word of mouth. That's still a super powerful way that people recommend books, and speaking opportunities, as in so-and-so belongs to a women's club and they have a speaker come in once a month and they might invite you to be that speaker. But I would say that most readers don't know they have this power. And part of the challenge of a writer is to kind of get these readers to do these things for them in a way that isn't pushy. And so my next slide kind of talks a little bit about some ways to do that. So connecting with readers and their communities. One thing that I did the day my book came out, the day before my book came out, I guess maybe right around then, is that I sent an email to my friends and family. These were the people who are on my Christmas card list. And basically I just said, hey, I've dreamed about this for 20 years. Some of you are probably sick of me talking about it, but it's a really big deal to me and it's happening tomorrow. And here are some ways that you could help me. I know that you are busy and I really don't expect you to do all of these things. But if there's any way in the next, month or so, you could find it in your heart to, tackle 1 or 2 of these things, that would be super amazing. And you know what? A lot of those people did. And that was very helpful and very heartening. And it was really neat to have so many of my friends and family in that journey, especially early on. So that was powerful. Another thing you can do is a newsletter. And so sometimes authors who haven't drunken the Kool-Aid yet ask, why in the world do I want to have a newsletter? What will I possibly talk about? A newsletter is a way for you to connect with your readers and tell them about your writing life and tell them about your personal life as much as you're comfortable with, or tell them about your reading life and share other friends' books. It might be a way to support other authors and things like that too. But you want a newsletter because you can control that. You collect these email addresses and you have captured them. They're yours. And when your next book comes out, you've got them all and you can let them know. And these are people who already have subscribed to listen to you talk once a month or once every 2 weeks or however often you do a newsletter. And so it is a community of its own. If you are interested in learning more about newsletters strategically and that sort of thing, there's a great book called Newsletter Ninja that I would recommend to anyone who wants to learn more about that. Next is social media. So social media is great. Social media algorithms change every 2 seconds. That's where the newsletter thing comes in, right? Because no matter what social media decides to do with their algorithm that either helps you or doesn't, you still have people's email addresses, connect with them that way. But that's not to discount social media or to say the algorithm is awful and I'm not going to do it. I understand there are some people who don't like it. I get that, but and you can do what you want, but there are millions and millions and millions of readers on social media. And if you're not, you're missing out on a key way to connect. So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about pre-existing platforms, because especially if you're new to this world, it makes sense to leverage platforms other people have built before creating your own. And so what I have here is a sort of the steps to think about when you're looking at platforms. So platforms, when I talk about platforms that already exist, 1455, this is a place that already exists. By my speaking to you today, I am meeting new people that I might not have known, or they're learning about me. And that's a great way for me to get some visibility with new people. Facebook, for example, has tons of reader groups. You can join them first as a reader, no matter where you are, and learn about great books to read and discover new books and make friends. And that can be really fun. A lot of places are doing like Zoom book clubs. So even if you don't have a book club locally, you can find a book club that meets virtually and connect with readers there. There are book festivals, things like that. So, and then of course you have bigger platforms like podcasts, and there are Instagrammers, and there are booktubers, and there are a million people out there who are influencers in the book space. And if they were to share their audience with you, it helps you to grow your audience. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that, because I think there are ways to do that and ways not to do that. And I'm not sure we're all super sensitive to that. So I have the experience of being one of the admins for a book Facebook group called Bookish Road Trip. And I find it fascinating the number of people, authors, who will pitch me for me to promote their books in our Facebook group, who haven't even joined our Facebook group, or who've never engaged on it. Even if they did actually join it, they've never said hi. And they don't necessarily even seem to know what we do. So in other words, they're just spamming every Facebook group they can. And, I'm sure they'll get some hits doing that. And the bigger name the author is, the more likely they are to get some hits. But, if there are limited spaces to promote people, those promotions are going to go to people who are part of your community and valuable. The more valuable they are, the more likely they are to get them. So I would suggest that first you identify what influencers you think would be a good fit. In other words, an influencer whose audience has significant overlap with yours. And you can make a list of 5 for Instagram, and 5 for YouTube, and 5 for Facebook, and 5, kind of, so then you're kind of spreading yourself out a little bit. Or you could go really deep one place and just do 30 Facebook things. Either way can work, but you kind of identify who your influencers are, and then you connect with them. If it's a podcast, you write a review for the podcast. If it's a blog, you comment on on several of their blog posts. You don't just do this once, but you actually connect with them. Maybe you send them an email and say, hey, I listened to this episode and I really liked this point that you made, and your guest was super awesome. And you don't say anything about you or your book or anything like that. You're just sending them a compliment. And now you are registered with them. They kind of oh, wow, that was nice. That made me feel good. And now this person's name is on my radar. And then as you're connecting with them over weeks, months, they know who you are. And you're sharing their posts, and you're supporting them in their endeavor. And then you pitch them. And if you do things in that order, the likelihood is that you will eventually get a yes. I had an experience not similar to this. I won't name the person this happened with, but there was a podcast that I wanted to be on, and I did share their podcast on my blog, and send them a nice email, and I did write a review. So I did do some things before I ever pitched, but I did those maybe in January, and I pitched in March. So it was pretty close together. And I ended up getting a no thank you, which was disappointing. But it was a reach. It was a bigger, big podcast. I'm a new author. It was a reach. But I did, because I was listening to the podcast and following this person's platform, I did really just sort of admire and like them. And I continued to do the things I had been doing, even though they said no. And then this person had a book come out, and I decided to continue to promote it and, help out with that in whatever ways I could. And when that was over, I sent an email to the person and just said, hey, congrats. And, just wanted to let you know, here are the things I did to help launch your book. If there's something else I can do, let me know. And I got a response that said, all right, fine, you could be a guest on my podcast. But it proved that the method worked. And I don't know that I was continuing to do that because I thought she was going to change her mind. I continued to do it because I did admire this person and what they were doing. And, I kind of wanted to be part of it. Anyway, it worked out nicely. So anyway, the quickest way to building your own community is looking at communities that already exist, being part of them, and then sharing your work with that community and asking them to join your own community, whether that's hopefully maybe through an email and being on your newsletter list. However, sometimes the community you need just doesn't exist. So I mentioned a while ago, a few slides ago, that I had created this author mastermind group, and that we worked like that for a few months, and then things changed. And what changed was that 3 of the 4 of us were launching a book fall of 2020 in the middle of a pandemic, and we're having difficulty finding events and places to promote our book. 2 of us were brand new to launching books, and one person had launched one book the year before. So she was still, experienced at a COVID launch. So after talking about how we couldn't find places willing to promote us, we decided we would create our own space. And so what we did was we created a Facebook group called Bookish Road Trip. And now, instead of an author mastermind group, we have a Facebook group. And hopefully we'll go back to being an author mastermind group too in the coming months. But basically what we did was we targeted people who liked to travel and liked to read, who were stuck at home during COVID reading and not traveling. And it really just took off in ways that I don't think any of us expected. And so the first thing to do if you're going to create your own community is decide who it is you're going to target. Who do you want to be part of this community and why? We do wide genre across the board, but we have our targeted of travel and books. And then you decide where you want this platform to be. So we did ours on Facebook. We were all comfortable with that social media platform, and real life didn't exist. But now, you might be asking yourself, do I want this community? Who do I want to be in this community? Maybe it's readers, maybe it's other authors. Maybe it's people who like to garden because you write gardening books, whatever, who it is, and then where you want to connect with them. Ideally, you could connect with them in multiple places, but I would recommend starting with one place, doing that well, getting that going, and then moving on. So we started in Facebook. We just last week launched an Instagram account, so that's really new. And in a month and a half, we're launching our first newsletter. So we're slowly growing. We're hoping that in 2022, we'll start to have in real life events. But being really strategic and smart about our growth and where and why and how. So who, and then where, and then what's your goal with the group? And I think that's really key to keep in mind. Is your goal to sell your books there? Is your goal to learn from people there? And you can have more than one goal, but you really probably should have the one overarching goal. And that's sort of drives the decisions and the content that you place there. And so once you've kind of developed those things, I think success comes from a couple other pieces of that. One is uniqueness, offering something that isn't there in that form. Having branding. We have a woman who I mentioned earlier, Julie Valerie, who does graphics for us. You can see our cute little logo on the slide. And I think that really helps, like, for example, when you're in Facebook and you're going through your news feed, you like instantly know the things that are coming from us because they have this branding on them. And so whatever your community is, having a logo, having a name, having colors, having fonts, that sort of thing can be really helpful. And then authenticity. I mean, what has happened in Bookish Road Trip is essentially we've gone in there and made friends, and had these like incredible, cool conversations with people. And I just never really thought I could make like legitimate friends in a Facebook group. And somehow that's what's happened. And I think it's because we've tried to be really ourselves there and to share who we are, but also to do so with such a positive and supportive environment. And we ask a lot of questions of the people who are there. Like, we try to get to know the people who are there. So someone says, hey, I went to this restaurant last weekend. Oh, what'd you order? And they say, gosh, I ordered a steak. Oh, I love steak. My favorite cut is the filet mignon. I'm making stuff up, and that's a silly conversation, but nonetheless, and sometimes they are silly, but we've also had some really deep and valuable conversations about people's like 9/11 experiences, for example. So I think being authentic and real can be huge in relating with other people, and doing that online is like maybe harder, but maybe even more appreciated if you can pull that off. But if you do it in person, that's good too. And so I'm going to wrap this up with a Connect with Me slide. I'm starting a newsletter next year in 2022 that's going to be about marketing tips. And I have a list of some marketing resources that I recommend. And if you want that, if you go to the top link with the /marketing and put in your email address, yes, put in your email address, I'll send you that marketing, those marketing resources. And as I develop some things in the next few months, I'll occasionally send something like that out. And then sometime in 2022, I'll launch the newsletter, and hopefully that will be helpful to many people. If you have questions, since we don't have the Q&A opportunity in this platform, my email address is there, and I'm happy to engage with any questions there. And I have more of a reader-author newsletter that exists now. It comes out once a month, and I call it The Gift of Story, and it has ideas for book clubs and author interviews and all kinds of bookish goodies. So if you wanted to sign up for that newsletter, that's at my more general email or website. So I think I have covered everything. It has been a real joy. Thank you for listening to me talk for 55 minutes. And hopefully I will get to connect with some of you outside of this Zoom meeting. I'm all done.